The window is 20 days old, and at the time of recording, we're yet to hear of any forthcoming business. January, of course, is notoriously a more difficult window, but our lack of activity so far has prompted questions about our summer window. Did we do enough? Are we perhaps paying the price for not strengthening sufficiently? Or can our rotten injury record this season explain what's been a frustrating campaign so far? We'll get into all of that and more on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. But first, a quick message from our partners. This video is brought to you by Stocks FC. Stocks FC is the football stock market where you can buy stocks in your favorite players and earn cash rewards based on their real-life performances. To get you started, they're giving away 5 free stocks to every user that signs up this month, offering you the chance to familiarize yourself with the platform. Buy stocks in young players you fancy to prove themselves and watch their stocks rise, or invest in those you see as solid performers who will maintain their value. Earn weekly dividend payments every time your players score goals, make assists and play key passes. Your free loan stocks are eligible for payouts for a month, so why not give it a go? To claim your 5 free loan stocks and begin your journey, scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description. I'll be taking you along on my journey throughout our upcoming videos. Join me on the ride, Stocks FC. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host Harry Symeou, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined once again by the brilliant Mike Stavrou. Mike, welcome back to the pod, mate. How have you been?
Yeah, really good, man. Really good. Took a bit of a break over Christmas, and that was very much needed. And yeah, the football never stops, but sometimes you need to stop and just take stock. I'm sure you didn't. I'm sure you had a very hectic Christmas.
Yeah, I kept going. I feel like I was saying to my wife the other day, I feel like I've been at Emirates Stadium over the last 3 weeks more than I've been at home. 2 games a week at home.
Yeah.
We were at home again at the weekend. We were at home again on Wednesday night against Dinamo Zagreb, so I'll be there again. It's relentless. It's nonstop. I'm glad they're home games, by the way, because it's a much easier journey. Sort of 20, 25 minutes in the car and you're there, which is fine. But yeah, it's been relentless. It's been nonstop. And because of the way everything's going, it's been quite difficult mentally, I think, as well. In a way, you know, you're in this weird spot where you're sort of obviously a little bit frustrated by some of the results. You're a little bit frustrated by what we're seeing on the pitch at times. But at the same time, you're trying to fight against the wave of negativity that I think is just completely over the top. You know, I was talking to a mate of mine this morning, right? And he's a Spurs fan. And he sent me this voice note and he was saying, well, you know, it was a rubbish weekend of football for both of us. And there's quite a few similarities in the 2 positions that we find ourselves in. I was like, mate, hold on a minute, right? You are 15th in the Premier League table. We are losing our minds because we're second. You are 15th. It is not the same thing. Let's not pretend that it is. But we've got quite a bit to get into today, Mike. We're going to focus on that summer transfer window. We're going to look back on it. We can do that now with hindsight. We're going to discuss whether we could have done more, whether that's come back to bite us a little bit as the season's gone on. We'll talk about the impact that injuries have had as well. But there are a couple of news bits as well that I want to get into. There's further reports coming out of Brazil suggesting that Jorginho has agreed terms with a club over there. Flamengo, I think, is the club that is being talked about. And this is a rumor that's been rife actually for a good couple of weeks now, that Jorginho wants to go, that, you know, it looks like it's on the cards. First of all, are you of the opinion that we should be letting Jorginho go? And then we'll discuss sort of the bigger picture.
I personally wouldn't. I think he's still quite a useful player. I mean, I think, you know, as recently as the back end of last season, after we had that trip to Dubai and we had that really difficult sort of winter period where we lost to West Ham, drew against Fulham, and it looked like the wheels were coming off a little bit. Obviously, we came back from Dubai and Arteta sort of reconfigured the team, moved Kai to number 9, and Jorginho came in, and it's not that it was necessarily him, it was more of a overall structural thing, but he really helped us, and obviously helped us go on that massive run and make it really, really tight towards the end of the season with City. So if he's done that, you know, as sort of early as last year, less than a year ago, you know, he was a key part of the team. don't really see why we would be rushing to get rid of him. If he was a guy that was just sitting on the bench and not contributing for a sustained period, then I'd say, yeah, let him go. But even as recently as Villa, I thought he should have come on, really. I thought 2-0 up, trying to control the game. He's the perfect sort of, profile for that. Keeping it simple, secure in possession. That's he should have come on in my opinion. Probably for Mikel Merino and then move Rice a bit further forward. Didn't happen. But I think the fact that we could have used him is says that we probably should keep him around. I don't think he's necessarily one of the top earners. I think if we give him another year contract, it's not going to leave us in a position where we can't go out and get another player. So for me, it's a kind of a no-brainer to keep him on for at least another year.
I get the feeling as well that Jorginho is obviously, from what we've read as well and what we've heard, it's not just a feeling, but we get the impression that Jorginho is quite interested in a coaching career sort of after he hangs up his boots. And I feel like if you're Arsenal and you can facilitate that as well, then you're kind of, you're giving him extra reason to stay. Like I don't really see Jorginho as the kind of guy that would sort of prolong his career for an extra 2-3 years because he's money obsessed. Like I think he's earned enough money over the course of his career.
Yeah.
I think, he probably wants to take that next step. And to add to that as well, we're talking about Flamengo, and I know that there are some really well-supported clubs in Brazil. There's no doubt about that, but the finance isn't there. So is a 1-year deal at Arsenal worth what you would get in a 2.5 year deal at Flamengo anyway? I'd suspect it is. So, yeah, I mean, look, I know a lot of people would argue that it's time to move on from him. I know a lot of people would argue that we should never have signed him in the first place, but I think he's proven during his time at Arsenal to be a very wise signing, to be able to come in and plug certain holes, give us something very different when we've needed him. And I guess I kind of agree with you that we should keep him, but it's not because I think Jorginho is the future for Arsenal necessarily. It's because I suspect, and let me know your thoughts on this, that Thomas Partey will be leaving. And to then expect us to regenerate the midfield so much that we're replacing those two players while pursuing the forward option that we all want as well, it feels like maybe it shouldn't be too much, but it feels like we'd be asking and expecting too much. And I don't necessarily trust that the club would deliver that.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of midfield churn. I think we're already seeing the reports about Zubimendi, and according to the Daily Mail, that's quite advanced. So that's something that we should maybe expect to see. And because it's come out of the blue, it's kind of like those deals that you expect will just get wrapped up because of the release clause as well. It's quite an easy deal to do in that sense. So we're talking about a complete sort of restructure. Just say that Thomas Partey goes.
Do you think he
will? Yeah, I think he will. I think it's it's a really difficult time for us in terms of our midfield structure. We've not really found the solutions that we want. So I think that will lead to a complete restructure in terms of how it looks. And I think Zubimendi is kind of like the answer to that. I think we've prioritized big sort of guys, physicality over technical ability, and I think Zubimendi coming would be redressing that balance a little bit. So I think that I see Zubimendi and Jorginho as quite similar profiles. So I think obviously if you have, just say Thomas Partey goes in this scenario, you'll have obviously Zubimendi, I assume would be the first choice, number 6, and then you'd have Declan Rice. But that means you're moving someone who's a starter as a backup, which is never helpful. And then say, who would it be if Jorginho went? Like, you'd be struggling after that, really, wouldn't you? You'd probably have to bring in someone else. So I just don't see why you would move him on if they're, he seems like a pretty like for like sub to come in for Zubimendi if that deal happens. So obviously we're doing a lot of speculating here, but in my head, that's kind of how I see it working.
Yeah, it feels like Zubimendi's the upgrade on Jorginho. But then if you lose Thomas Partey as well, you probably need to do a little bit more. And I actually think in a weird way, like if you're regenerating the midfield, I know that he plays a lot at the moment. And I know he's shown that he can, depending on what way you look at it, play at right back. I know a lot of people would argue that he can't, Thomas Partey that is. But I suspect that he's the one that Arsenal will be keener to see the back of. And it's no disrespect to his playing ability, but I think, there are other factors, one of them being his salary. He's a big earner at Arsenal Football Club, and his injury record as well has been really, really patchy. And there are times where Thomas Partey is fit, at least on paper, and is fit enough to start games. But there are times where he doesn't look fit, if that makes sense. So I suspect he will be gone, and that then opens the door for me, at least, to Jorginho staying. I do want to talk a little bit about William Saliba, Mike, because there are some reports coming out of France today. L'Equipe reporting that he's expected to be out for 2 weeks now with that what looked like a hamstring problem that saw him miss the game against Aston Villa, which means he would probably miss the game against Manchester City, or at least he's in a race against time to get back for that one. That's a massive, massive blow for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. I read an article this morning by one of my colleagues, Jordan Campbell, and it kind of like goes to solidify how important he's been. So this was only the 13th Premier League game, i.e. against Villa at the weekend, out of 98 that Saliba's not started since him and Gabriel formed that partnership at the start of the 22-23 season. When Saliba plays, Arsenal win 71.8% of the time and concede an average 0.8 goals. When he doesn't, Arsenal win just 38.5% of the time and concede 1.7 goals a game. So that's, I mean, I know those sort of with and without stats are sort of difficult to put into context and stuff because there'll be other factors involved. But I mean, that's a huge drop. That's a massive, massive drop when he's not there. Because obviously, the thing about defense is that it's all about partnership. So we talk about Saliba, but you can't talk about Saliba without talking about Gabriel and the relationship that they have. Like I'm a Saliba guy. I know you're a Gabriel guy, but it's kind of like pick your poison in a way. Like I prefer that sort of, Rolls Royce kind of defender, the speed, the sort of, last line of defense, sweeping everything up, can dribble through players as well. But yeah, those two together are just a machine. And I think we did see the sort of massive drop off when he wasn't in the team. So that's definitely concerning because I mean, at a time where we've not got our best player, Bukayo Saka, in attack, the last thing you want is then more injuries to key positions. And if we're talking about us being a defensive first team and we lose our sort of one of our partners, then that's tough, really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. What I will say is, I know defensively we weren't exactly sound against Aston Villa the other day and we threw away that 2-goal lead and all the rest of it, but I'm actually okay with Jurrien Timber tucking in there. Like, I don't have a problem with that. It's just what it means for you at right back. And if some of the reports that we're reading today, Sam Dean, I think Sam Dean's of the Telegraph. Let me just double check this. Don't want to get it wrong. Yep, Sam Dean of the Telegraph said that Ben White, Tomiyasu, and Calafiori are all believed to be close to a return. Now, that could be next week, that could be in 2 weeks, that could be in 3 weeks. I don't know. But if Ben White was available or Tomiyasu was available, players that can help us on that right side, I don't have so much of an issue with Timber tucking in. And I think those Saliba stats that you brought up, they're really, really valid, obviously, and important. But I do think about who would have played in those games in his absence over the years. And there would have been times where it was Rob Holding. There would have been times where, we were playing Kivior on the right side, which I don't think really works. And so I think you might see that win percentage without William Saliba actually increase quite dramatically if you've got the means to use Timber as the centre-back, which is the position he's played throughout his career, or you could put Ben White in there. And at the minute, we can't do that because of the injury issues we've had, which kind of speaks to, some of the concerns that we've had all season. Is it injuries? Like, is that the excuse, if you like? Is that what we should be looking at rather than sort of criticizing the squad building? We'll come on to that in more detail later, but do you see what I'm trying to say? If you've got those players, it's different, isn't it?
Well, when you said, we're waiting to see whether Ben White, Tomiyasu, and Calafiori, I feel like I've been hearing that all season. I've been waiting for those guys to come back for so long. I kind of forgot they existed. Like, it's just been a perennial problem throughout the whole season that when we look like things might be picking up, i.e. the win against Spurs, I mean, how big was that? Like, how big was that game in terms of, arresting that slide of the 2 cup defeats, beating our rivals, contributing to their downfall, which I'm sure would have been a massive blow to their mentality as much as it was a win for us. And then when you don't build on it, it just kind of it makes it pointless in a way. Like what would be the difference now? We'd probably maybe be in a better position if we'd drawn against Spurs and won against Villa, because we'd have that momentum, and also we'd have that bit of a beating Unai Emery, because he's sort of stopped us so many times over the last few seasons. So I'm just like, every time like something goes our way, we hear some more bad news. And in this case, it's, William Saliba, and it's, when are we going to get Ben White and Tomiyasu and Calafiori back? And it's like, maybe you can, and we will come on to this. I won't go on too long, but we've spoken about this, the squad building in parts, but we've got loads of defenders. Like, we've got loads, but they're just all out injured at the same time. And look, I think I agree with your original point that the backup to Saliba has not always been top level. I will say I did think, and we're not going to come up against Ollie Watkins every week, but I did think Timber struggled a little bit physically. I think when the ball was over towards Timber's side and Gabriel couldn't sort of aerially dominate as he does, I thought Timber struggled physically. Because I think more so, and we've spoken about this before, I think he is more of the profile of a fullback or a midfielder, just because of his size, his frame. He's agile. He's not exactly a dominating centre back. So I think that's his struggle. I think probably gives us a little bit more. I did see him creeping into midfield a few times. I almost thought, mate, have you forgotten that you're playing centre back and not right back? And I was like, what are you doing? But yeah, he's definitely an upgrade to Rob Holding and Kivior, that's for sure. What that says about Kivior, I'm not really too sure. Maybe he's one of the ones that we might be looking to move on, because if he's not coming in when there's an injury and we're moving our right back to centre back, I would say it doesn't look too good for his standing in the team at the moment.
Let's get your thoughts then, just very quickly, on that Aston Villa game, because we haven't spoken since. Obviously, we did the post-match sort of podcast the following morning. We did the match day reaction one over on Patreon, and I thought I was quite okay with it, considering what that result probably meant. Like, it felt like we'd done so much hard work to get ourselves into a position where we were winning again. We beat Tottenham. We take 2 points out of Liverpool's lead. And then a few sort of days later, we literally hand them those 2 points back by dropping points at home to Villa. The big debate coming away from the game was, should Partey have played at right back? What's your take on how that game went overall? And then that question, was Mikel right to use Thomas Partey in that position, given our record with him playing there is not that great?
So this is not good for the pod, but I was too depressed to watch the highlights back after going to the game, because it was like being in the stadium, and it was such a sucker punch to sort of have that elation of finally going 2 goals up. I mean, we've barely gone 1 goal up in recent games, but to go 2-0 up against a team that has really been a rival for us over recent seasons, for the reasons that I said earlier, like to have that lead and then to sort of collapse in the way we did, and then get the winner at the end, but then have that taken away from you, was such a hammer blow. We all went absolutely wild. Like, I almost fell over into the row below me, celebrating that goal that wasn't a goal. And yeah, to have that taken away was such a blow. So I think that has impacted how I feel about it. Obviously, yeah, as you say, I could see from all the way up there in row 29 of upper tier from where I was that Thomas Partey was at fault. That's obviously clear to see. But I think more so, it's really disappointing because we've had these games against Newcastle, against United, and even Spurs, where we had all these chances but just couldn't stick it away. And on the day where our finishing was better and our chance conversion was better, we then give up a lead. So it just feels like, no matter what you do, no matter how the game goes, no matter how we approach it and what we put into it, the result is the same, that we're left disappointed. And I think that's why it's kind of led to this reaction off the back of it, that it's just like, what can we do? Like, we feel so frustrated because whether it's injuries, whether it's squad building, whether it's not sticking chances away, whether it's red cards, it just feels like it's not our season. what I don't want is, and what is happening, and it's kind of inevitable with the size of the club that we are, is that we just end up arguing with each other. And I think we have to, we have to step back a little bit if we can. And I know I just spoke about the emotions of the match, but see how far we have come and where we are. We're talking about an awful season, but as you say, we're still second. So yeah, it's tough, but I think all of us at the beginning of the season thought, this might be our year, and it's not working out that way, and it's disappointing. But we have to try and factor in all these things and come to some sort of objective, conclusion if we can, which is tough. I understand.
I think sometimes I feel like when I'm talking about these games or the scenario and situation that we find ourselves in, I get people coming at me and going, why are you happy with this? Why are you accepting this? Why are you tolerant of this? Blah, blah, blah. You're part of the problem, etc., etc. I get that a lot. I'm not happy with it. I'm not bloody happy with it. I'm not happy turning up and watching the team struggle to score goals and then watch them get undone at the back like they were at the weekend and concede cheap, rubbish goals like that. I'm not happy with it. But there is a context to why we are where we are. There is a context to why the team is struggling at the moment. And some of it is Mikel Arteta's fault. Some of it is the club's fault. Some of it is the players' fault. Some of it is individual players' fault. There are so many variables in this sport, which is why for me it's the best sport in the world, because there's so many things that can happen. You've got 22 players on the pitch at any given time. You've got big squads. Teams are making 4 or 5 changes in a game now. Like, there are so many variables to football. That's what makes it special. But you can't pretend that those variables don't exist when it suits you. And then all of a sudden, just like be outraged when outrage isn't like, for me, the feeling this season, Mike, is not, it's not, oh my God, Manchester City were the kings of the castle. We were chasing them for all these years. They've finally fallen away and now we've messed it up. We're effing crap. That's not my feeling this season. My feeling is one of disappointment, frustration, because when we needed a little bit of luck, when we needed the rub of the green to be able to take advantage of Manchester City dropping off, we haven't had it. We haven't had it. But also there's a part of me that looks at it. Going into the Villa game, we had the same points at that stage in the season as we did last season. And then we went on this incredible run and we were very, very unlucky, in my opinion, in the end, not to win the Premier League title. So there's a part of me that looks at that and goes, well, we did very, very well overall last season and we're on the same sort of trajectory in terms of, or at the same rate in terms of collecting points. Can I really sit here and claim that this is the disaster season that some people want you to believe it is? Is it a disaster? No. What Tottenham are experiencing is a disaster. Manchester United being down, in 13th place, having spent hundreds of millions of pounds on a load of rubbish over the last few years. That's a disaster. This is a slightly underwhelming campaign, but it isn't worse than that. Like, am I fair in saying that, or am I being deluded? Is it with Arsenal tinted glasses on that I'm looking at this?
I think it's really, really, really tough because I see both points of view. I think almost in previous seasons when we've been battling with Man City, it's kind of been a bit of a not an excuse, but at the end of the season, we've been able to say, "Well, it's Man City. What can we do? Like that, they are this juggernaut. They're so hard to overthrow." So now that is taken out of the equation, I think it is more understandable to criticize and for people to look for something to try and understand how Arne Slot has come in and looks like they're going to win the league in the first season and use that as a stick to beat Arsenal with. Now, obviously, as we know, there's a lot of context, a lot of nuance to that. But that's why it's created this feeling of like we've been waiting for our chance. It's not quite come against Man City, but we'll let that go. They're an amazing team. When our chance does feel like it's come, it's just been out of our grasp. And it's because it feels like we're so close and we just need that one little important thing to go for us, whether that be, being injury free, all the things we've spoken about. I'm not going to go back through them again. And it's not quite going our way. So then, as I say, what people do, they look for something to criticize or look for an excuse. It could just be that the reason is all of those factors that we speak about combined. But that's quite hard to accept for a fan, especially because we want like an outlet for our anger and frustration. We want to be able to say it's this player, it's the manager, it's this, it's that. Whereas actually, if you look at it and take the emotion out, it probably is a combination of all those things. But as a fan myself, it's upsetting and frustrating because we've been waiting so long for this. You know, pre-Arteta, 20 years since we won the title. It's like the frustrations of all of them years just built up and built up and built up. And you know, when you're rubbish, you kind of you sign it off. You're like, well, you know, we're shit. We're not going to win it. When you're close and you're good, and you're up there, it's even harder when you don't make the cut. So look, I get it. And we can talk about all the reasons on this pod, I'm sure. But you know, we can say to fans that you know we understand that. We're not saying that you're wrong and this is the reason. It's just it needs to be a bit more nuance to it, as I say.
All right. So you said that, and I'm not going at you with this. I
Yeah,
understand this is a general opinion, and I'm asking you the question because I'm genuinely curious to know. You said that we need someone to pin it on, like we need someone to look at, or a reason to say this is why. I don't feel like that. I've watched this team grow and develop over the last 2.5 years to the point where they've got goodwill with me. The manager's got goodwill with me. The club has got goodwill with me to a certain degree. And the club is not any one individual person. And if I'm being completely honest, of all the individuals involved in this, whether that be Mikel Arteta, the individual players, if you break them down one by one, the person that I probably have the least sympathy for and the person that I'm going to defend last would be Josh or Stan Kroenke. Like I care nothing for them. Like, and I don't
mm,
mean that in a horrible way. I just care
mm,
nothing for them. Okay.
mm.
I don't turn up and watch them every week. I don't turn up and support them every week. I turn up and I support the Arsenal and I support those that represent the Arsenal on the pitch and sort of in the coaching staff, etc., etc. I don't feel like, and it's because I've got that goodwill towards this group of players and this manager that I need a scapegoat. I don't feel like I need that. Now, is it fair to say that a lot of people do? Is that how people process frustration? Maybe it's me being an idiot. I don't know. Um, but I can't look at that score. Like, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Kai Havertz, whether it's Leandro Trossard, whether it's Declan Rice, whether it's Gabriel. If I feel like there is a pylon to one individual person, when I can see, and I think if everybody opens their eyes, they can see that the issue is a collective one, then I'm going to leap to that person's defense because they have that goodwill with me. I prefer, or that's my mode of thinking. And I know that a lot of people will say, no, actually, I will feel a lot better if I can figure out who the problem is and then I can sort of pin
Yeah.
it on them. Is that just a difference in mentality and difference in the way of looking at it?
Yeah, massively. And look, I'm somewhere in between because I think after matches, we all feel that emotion. We all want to, you know, get angry and you know try and deal with that anger by maybe placing that blame somewhere. But I think where I come into it is like after a day or so, sometimes more, I can kind of sit down and you know look through and discuss with people the reasons as to why this is happening. Some people can't let that go. They kind of keep that going, and you know, once they've got their agenda and this person's to blame, then that's what they'll push. Um, Sometimes it's genuine. Sometimes, let's be honest, that's made up for YouTube or TikTok or
Yeah.
or whatever. That's a different conversation. But I think it is somewhere in between a lot of the time. I think where the extra frustration and anger is boiling over is that, you know, this is not a few years into a project, it's 5 years into a project.
Mm.
It's hard to see any project out there that's really had that time with only one cup. I guess, you know, looking at the similar eras that like I always do, like Pep Guardiola obviously won, you know, pretty early on. I think Jurgen Klopp won in his fifth season, maybe fourth full season, won the league, but obviously won the Champions League as well. So I think we're not seeing that reward, and that's why I even said on this pod, I would love us to just win an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup because I think the players deserve a reward for you know sticking with the project and growing with the team. I think the fans deserve a day out at Wembley to celebrate. I think we all would love to come together and feel like, okay, it's not the big one, but it's something to keep us going. And because we're not getting that, that adds extra sort of pressure to it all. And we're all thinking in the back of our minds, like, when is it going to happen? And because there's no answer to that, because we don't know that if we sign this and that player in the summer, then next year is going to be our year. We're just constantly sort of kicking that can down the road, which is quite a difficult thing to deal with, because we don't know season by season how the opposition are going to react. We can only just focus on ourselves. So it is tough. I understand it. I think there's definitely multiple people to blame. But there's also multiple factors that we can look at to say, okay, it's understandable why maybe this has happened and this has happened. So
yeah, good summary. Let's talk Benjamin Sesko. There's some reports around him again this week, suggestions that Arsenal are ready to, and I'll just quote what's been said, go big for Benjamin Sesko during this window. We don't know if a deal is even possible. We don't know if he would move mid-season. We don't know if RB Leipzig would even sell, right, at this stage. We're on the fence about it. We've heard lots of people report that it's very unlikely. We've heard others say that, it might happen. And now we're hearing Arsenal will go big to get it done. Forget all the speculation, because we're not privy to any of that. But would you go big for him? And how big is too big for a player like Benjamin Sesko? I know he's a big lad, but how big is too big?
I think given that, our pursuit of him last year, I think we're probably, we're safe in saying that he's someone that the club wanted or wants. So a lot of the time when we're sort of talking about transfer speculation, it's like, would Arteta even want this player? Is he even suited? I think in this case we can say, as per reports, that yes, like, he is what we want. So I think it's just about weighing up whether that's possible, wage demands, what the player wants, where he sees his role. Is he happy? I think the difficult factor in all this, in terms of money, is the contracts. Obviously, he signed one last summer till 2029. So if you want to buy him out of that contract, they're going to ask for a pretty penny. So I think that makes it difficult. Obviously, no big club wants to lose a player in January. But from our perspective, if we see him as someone that we want anyway, how much extra of your money is it worth to just put the money down and go say, we might be paying another 20, 30, 40 million on top of what we pay in the summer, or what we tried to get him for in the summer. Let's just do it because he'll give us a proper chance at the title. Because for me, I think the plain thing for anyone to see is that Kai is dead on his feet. That guy is suffering a bit of a crisis of confidence. Obviously, the goal against Villa would have helped that massively. But there's so much pressure on him. We've spoken about the minutes that he plays this season. He's knackered. He needs a break. So whatever solution that comes in, if we were to go and put that money down for Sesko, and that pushes us closer, it'd be amazing. Is it going to happen? Just judging by, as we've said, multiple times, this club don't really do that in January. I think they stick to the plan. They stick to what they think they might want to do, and they go with that, and they don't necessarily rush. Although I do think, I'm not sure we've ever been in a position where we have so little options up front, and it's happened before with injuries and stuff, but I can't remember it ever being this sort of light, in the sense that front three of Havertz, Trossard, and Martinelli basically have to play every game now. And we only made one sub against Villa, which was Raheem Sterling, which is pretty bad. You've got to say, like, to not make to make one sub when Villa used all of their 5, I think, is, that's a huge difference. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and Mikel Arteta, I thought, sort of sent that message, didn't he, post-match, where he said, look, I didn't have anything to change it. And I remember being in a position maybe a year and a half ago where on a podcast I'd sat there and I said, I was in the stands and I'm looking at Mikel and I'm thinking, come on, make that change. Like, something needs to be different. Then we need that kind of spark. And then I looked at the list of players on the bench and I couldn't see where that spark was going to come from. And I'd imagine that Mikel would have been looking behind him and thinking, I don't trust any of you to come on and make a difference. And I know people will talk about squad building, and we'll come on to that in just a second. But sometimes it is just rotten luck. And like, to be without Saka now, to be without Jesus, to be without Ethan Nwaneri, who was being used as an option on that right side, especially, all at the same time, it's really, really rotten luck. And people keep saying, oh, you know, squad building and more depth. How deep can you possibly go? Like, how deep can you feasibly go without having unhappy players just lurking around your football club for large periods of time? Because when everyone's fit, if you fall 4 or 5 places down the pecking order, how are you going to be happy? Like, how can you keep those players around the place? So you can't always mitigate for this volume of injuries. You just can't. Let's talk about the summer window then, okay? Because, you know, at the time, I think there were mixed feelings on it. We talked a lot on this podcast about it being a window in which we maybe raised the floor, but not necessarily the ceiling within the squad. We bring in Ricardo Calafiori, injury prone. Said it before we signed him. In he comes. It's injury after injury after injury. We bring in Mikel Merino, who, again, I said in the summer, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet, was not going to be a guaranteed starter in this Arsenal team, regardless of what people were telling me. And he's come in, and I'm not sure about him. And then we obviously panicked at the last minute and brought Raheem Sterling in to bolster the attacking options. But nobody's going to convince me, as I've said time and time again, that was Mikel Arteta's first choice in that department. I know you've got quite a strong opinion on Raheem Sterling, so I feel like that's a good player to start on.
I mean, the way I'll sum it up is, I remember, might have been earlier this season, might have been last season, but Jamie Carragher said something about Casemiro for Manchester United and said, you know, leave football before the football leaves you. I think that's probably more apt for Raheem Sterling than Casemiro, to be honest, because when I saw that guy in the North London derby and then again against Villa, but throughout the season, really, it just looks like he's lost his spark, his confidence. And it's really weird because you know that that's in there deep down, because he comes up with these little, you know, moments where he picks the ball up and sprints and dribbles, and you think to yourself, okay, well, it's there, right? It's somewhere, it's there, like you can see it, and you can see maybe like, you know, it's like when you're lighting a sprinkler and it slowly goes out. Like, it's a bright spark to begin with, and then all of a sudden it's like gone. And that's what I kind of think with Sterling. It's like that sort of player. You know, we've seen it before. At Liverpool, he was incredible when he was a youngster. At City, he became, all right, maybe less explosive, but more of like a really, you know, efficient player. And, you know, never the best sort of shooting technique, but really good in one-on-ones, and was always at the back post to finish off a move. This version of Raheem Sterling we're seeing now, I don't know what, he doesn't offer anything, because ultimately he gets on the ball and he doesn't have the confidence to execute what he has done in the past or what he needs to do to help us. And I think it's really sad. Like, I'll start off by saying I'm not having a go at him. I think it's really sad. You know, from what's happened in his career at Chelsea, you know, the players booing him at the fans booing him at times, I thought was completely out of order. And I called that out to my Chelsea mates at the time. But having seen him at Arsenal, I don't think he's not any better. He's just the same player. You know, complete crisis of confidence. I don't really know what he can offer. You know, when he came on as against Villa, passing backwards, you know, not really dribbling, not taking on players, and then, you know, when he does, he doesn't really get anywhere. So I just think he's kind of hamstrung us in a way, because obviously we can only have 2 Premier League loans. One of them's taken up by Neto, who has he even played yet? He's maybe played once. And Sterling. So both offering nothing essentially, which is quite a big thing to say, that we can't go out and get a Premier League loan. Because I think we're talking about an overseas loan, but obviously Premier League is much more of a sure thing. So I think it's a real problem, really, like on the pitch and sort of off the pitch, in sort of creating a block for who he could potentially bring in. And it's just, yeah, as I say, sad, because he's had a great career, and, you know, if he retired now, he's won loads. You know, he's been a great player for England. You know, great player in his club career, so he can retire in the next few years. I don't know how long he's gonna stick around for at the top level, but he can retire saying he's had a great career. But for what we need now, it's nowhere near, and especially because we're looking at it saying this is a position that Saka has mastered and has shown us, how dangerous he can be. And then we see Sterling coming in next. It's just such a huge drop off, and it's as I say, it's sad.
It is sad. And at the time we signed him, like we all had those conversations about, going and getting a sort of big time attacker that was going to be a longer term thing, right? And we were all disappointed that that didn't happen. But I tried to look at the Sterling deal through a positive lens. Like it was very little risk in terms of what we were doing. We weren't paying a transfer fee. We were paying a very small proportion of his wages in comparison to what you would normally pay when you take a player on loan. And in comes this guy who you think has got this huge point to prove, to link up with a manager that he has talked about in the past glowingly, who has been credited with a lot of his development. And you think, not the ideal scenario, not the ideal transfer, not the ideal move, but one that I can understand the merit behind and one that I can support. In he comes and he's offered nothing. And people will argue, and I've heard this counter argument quite a bit, which is why I want to bring it up. Well, he hasn't been given enough chances. Read between the lines. If he hasn't been given chances, it's because there's something missing. The guy who watches him and coaches him and trains him every single day, who knows him inside out and therefore knows exactly what he's capable of, can see that there is something missing. This is not the same Raheem Sterling anymore. So he doesn't pick him. He doesn't trust him. He doesn't rely on him. And when he played the North London derby, I remember at the start of the game, 10, 15 minutes in, had my laptop in front of me. One of the notes that I put down, and I've since looked back at this, Sterling looks lively. This was 10, 15 minutes into the game. What happened after that? I don't know. Because his level just completely dropped. And for me, as you say, it's not that he doesn't have the ability. It's not that that isn't in him or within him. It's that the confidence has gone. He tried to take on Jed Spence around about 18 to 20 minutes into
That's
the
what
game.
I was thinking about. Yeah.
And he couldn't do it. He couldn't get around him on that particular occasion. And it was as if Raheem Sterling just went, I can't beat you, so I'm not going to try it anymore.
Yeah.
And then every time he got the ball, rather than being the direct Raheem Sterling, the bold Raheem Sterling, the brave Raheem Sterling that can jink in and out of challenges and work his way into the penalty area, he just wanted to put his foot on the ball every single time and just roll it back inside, therefore making us really predictable and really easy to defend against. So there is something missing with Raheem Sterling. And you're right about the Premier League loan thing. That is a problem for us. I don't see a world in which we send him back, particularly with the injury problems we got at the minute. But would it be the worst idea in the world?
No, I don't think it would, really. Because if we're talking about like we really need another attacker, just for instance, a name that's been linked to us, say Matheus Cunha, we can't make it work financially in January. Maybe there's a world in which you say, all right, Wolves, we're not going to pay what you want right now, but let's do a loan. Like, we really need this player. We'll give you a loan fee, whatever. And we can't do that. So the options are limited. And because we're talking about it's January, we want instant impact. And I think the only way you get instant impact is by signing a Premier League player who's Premier League ready and has been playing the whole season at decent level. Obviously, that's easy to do when we don't have names. Cunha is probably not a realistic example of that, of a team that's going to let someone go, especially if it's not for a transfer fee. But I think we could be in the territory of Dennis Suarez is here. January transfers can go bad. We've got a bad record with them. Let's be honest. Like Leandro Trossard was January, I think, and that went pretty well. But there's not loads of names that have really worked out for us, and we really need that sort of player to come in and help us, get across the line, if not to win the league, to at least push Liverpool as far as we can get. So yeah, it's disappointing. It's really disappointing, and yeah, I noticed that moment with Jed Spence as well. It kind of, he had him, and Jed Spence wasn't worried for the rest of the game. And I think similar with Aston Villa as well when he came on. So yeah, it's a difficult situation. Obviously, I don't think we will send him back. But yeah, it's tough.
What about that summer window then on the whole? Do you look back at it with regret? Do you think that Arsenal have just been, obviously they wanted, or we wanted them to go. I keep talking about it, but we wanted them to go out and get that big name attacker. They didn't do that. The justification was kind of, well, we couldn't get the guy that we wanted. The right player wasn't available, etc., etc. Do you look back on that with regret? Do you think that Arsenal couldn't possibly have seen this wave of injuries coming, and therefore we should be somewhat sympathetic towards their approach in the summer? Like, I guess the question I'm asking in a roundabout way, Mike, is how much of the problems that we're experiencing now do you put down to what we did or didn't do in the summer window? Like, give me a percentage. Is it 50, 60, 70, 10? Like, what is it in terms of a percentage?
It's tough to put a percentage on. I would say probably 30, 40%. On that specific window. But if you're asking me, and this is something I spoke about last time I was on, I think it's not just a summer window, and we can go into that shortly. But I think it's the overall squad building and the lack of investment in forwards as a whole, which I've spoken about. I can't remember the exact figures, but it was something like 700, 800 million or something, and then only 120 of that was on forwards, and 65 million of that was on Kai Havertz, who was brought in as a midfielder. That, as a percentage of your attack, is not good enough if you want to build a title-winning team for me. And this might sound hypocritical, because I'm pretty sure in the summer I was saying, we've shown that we can score enough goals because we've beaten our goals record 2 seasons in a row. I think there is context to that, in the sense that the goals per game is going up generally in the Premier League. I think that's a trend that's continuing. So, I wouldn't necessarily say that's like a silver bullet or anything like that. But I think the overall trend of not investing in that forward area or forward areas is not quite good enough when we're thinking about a team that is so close and just needs that final piece. In terms of the summer window last year, look, I understand that the club has their top target, and it's a very specific position that we ask our centre forward to play, and there's probably not loads and loads of centre forwards out there that can do that job. But I think the problem is that if we couldn't get that centre forward, I think we needed to be a bit more creative in our solutions. So maybe bring in a wide player that's a bit more versatile, that can play off the left or down the right or through the middle. I don't think the solution is to buy Raheem Sterling on, in the last few days of the transfer window. That's where my issue is. And then in terms of the other sort of summer signings, they've both been a massive disappointment. I can't think anyone can sit here and say that Calafiori and Mikel Merino have been a success. They haven't. As you said, Calafiori has had injury problems in the past. It's a position that we've had injury problems in previously. Kieran Tierney, Zinchenko have both had injury problems. Tomiyasu has had injury problems. So you're adding another question mark into the equation to add to the 3-4 left backs that we already have. And I'm sitting here thinking, and I'll be interested to get your take on this, but Calafiori has had 8 starts in the Premier League, so that's clearly not enough. Yeah. I would rather have Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back if both fit. I think that he's 18 years old, and when they've both played, I don't think his performance level is any worse than Calafiori's. And that, what does that say for a 45 million euro signing? I don't know what that is in pounds, but that's what I could find on Transfermarkt. But what does that say? Someone who's free is 18 years old versus someone you paid 45 million for, and doesn't get on the pitch.
You make a great point. Like, I'm not in a place anymore where I look at Miles Lewis-Skelly's name on the team sheet and I worry, because he's shown maturity, he's shown strength, which I think is really, really important. In the Premier League, he's shown that not only does he possess that strength, but he knows how to use it. He knows how to use his body to protect the ball. All of that is really, really important stuff. And yeah, I mean, Calafiori, for me, he's a centre back. He's a centre half, and we bought him to put him in this left back role because we like to play with centre halves at full back when everybody's fit and available. That's what we like to do. And look, you need more than one option, and I'd still rather have Calafiori there than Zinchenko Obviously, Kieran Tierney's leaving. Takahiro Tomiyasu's been an option for us there, but we can't rely on him because of injuries. Jurian Timber, I think, looks so much more comfortable on the right-hand side. I know he can do a job at left back defensively, but offensively, we miss something when he plays there. So the Calafiori signing, I don't even have a major problem with that. But you make a good point, which is why people will look at that signing and say, not let's write Ricardo Calafiori off at this stage in his Arsenal career, but was that really a huge need? I've just reeled off a load of people that we could use at left back. And then you start to think, well, did we need to prioritize that? And should we have spent extra money on getting the forward that we wanted rather than bringing in another left fullback option? I know Calafiori's versatile and he can play left back, left centre back, etc. And that would have been part of the thinking, of course. And I do think that Arsenal's transfer policy or strategy means that sometimes they're willing to pay a little bit extra for a player that they think can help them in multiple areas. I think that was the thinking when they signed Ben White right at the beginning of this project. Centre back, but we can use him as a right back. We can use him as a midfielder. We can use him in all those different areas. And therefore, actually, if we've got to pay a bit more, fine. But that doesn't give you more bodies, does it? So when that player is injured, you then still have a lot of the same issues. But just going back to the attack for a second, we've got 43 goals in the Premier League so far this season. Only City and Liverpool have scored more than us. City have got 44. Liverpool have got 50. So it's not like the goals have completely dried up. Like we've got 43 goals in 22 games. So it's just under 2 goals per game. It's not like we are really, really, really struggling to find the back of the net. And that's where I feel like, again, context needs to be applied. Like you need to look across the Premier League and look at how many goals other teams are scoring to understand how bad or not bad your situation is. Brentford are not far off us though on 40, which is a little bit alarming. Chelsea only 2 behind us on 41. Spurs have scored more goals than us this season, but of course they concede for fun. They've also conceded 14, 15 more goals than us. So, that balances itself out. But 2 goals per game on average, that should be enough to win most games, Mike. It should be, regardless of the injuries and the lack of options.
How many set pieces? I'd be interested to, because
I
when
don't know.
And look, I'm not saying that to sort of rehash that whole set piece FC debate or anything. I'm just saying that, yeah, look, I agree with you. Like the goals haven't been a major issue, and we've probably not spoken about it all season before the last sort of month or so. So we can't use that as an excuse for the entire season. But I still think it goes back to certain moments when we're creating loads of chances. It's that lack of confidence in front of goal that really, and it seems to hamper us at the biggest moments, like against Bayern Munich last season. It really hampered us in the cups this season when we really needed a goal, we just couldn't find it, and that's maybe like a confidence thing as a whole. But the overall point that I guess I'm trying to make with the summer businesses and previous windows is that we've spoken about this. We've prioritized defensive cover and the profile of player that is 6 foot plus, is suited for a more defensive style of football. We've prioritized that. And to me, this Zubimendi link is really interesting because, as I say, it's like we're trying to change that. So does that say that maybe we've approached that slightly wrong? Maybe we've sacrificed the technique in order for more power, more defensive stability. And has that been realized? Because I think we've seen that on the pitch. And even if the results have been good this season, not great, obviously, we're still second in the table. The performances haven't been there. We're not blowing teams away like we have done in the past. We do rely on set pieces. And so for me, that is like having that reliance on set pieces, which we know we do, like by the numbers. I think that is saying that that's not conducive to a team that's going to sustain, results over a long period of time. I think, you beat teams by the odd goal if you rely on set pieces, I think, because you need the extra margins. And maybe this is where we come back to a conversation about, is Arteta so focused on the margins and those marginal gains that he's taken a bit out of the team in terms of spontaneity, in terms of being really fierce in attack and scaring teams, and we're a bit predictable. So I think overall the transfers point to that. I just want to make a very quick point and ask you a question on Mikel Merino,
Mm.
because I think again the Zubameni stuff is really interesting because I think that kind of says that he's not a starter, as you said you felt before. So my question is, what does Merino offer? I guess if we're looking at him in the team on the pitch, but also next season, I guess he's going to be a backup player, right? If these moves work out.
Yeah, it's a tough one with Merino because there's a part of me, like there's a part of my brain that screams at me every time I watch him play, like, what the hell is this guy offering? But there's a part of me at the same time that goes, it's his first season. He missed the first 2 months with injury. The team has been a bit unbalanced, generally speaking, in my opinion, anyway. And how much of that can I pin it on him? How much of his underwhelming output is actually a consequence of the team being a little bit underwhelming? Because it's not like, for example, when Rice plays left 8, you're not getting the return out of Rice that you did last season in terms of shots, goals, assists. Like, you're just not getting that same output. So when Merino plays and I don't see any output, I'm kind of like, well, okay, let me compare that to Rice's output when playing in that same role. And actually, there ain't a great deal of difference. Rice gives you other things, of course, and it helps you defensively and whatever. And then I started to think about what people were talking about Merino bringing before we signed him, which was dual monster. That's what everybody kept saying. He's a dual monster. And if you look at the numbers, he does win a fair few duels, but like, are they difference making in terms of like actually, for instance, does he win a duel high up the pitch that then leads to us going and creating a chance? Or is he just winning a duel in the middle third that leads to us putting our foot on the ball and rolling it back to the centre back? In which case, those duels, they're not really giving me anything. They don't really mean anything.
Yeah.
And, like a lot of people will always go back to sort of the final third as our problem. I actually think a lot of our issues this season have come from that midfield being imbalanced. And, I don't think we've created as many chances as we should with the talent that we have. And people keep talking about possession. We dominate possession pretty much every time we play. Yet we don't, like, we have a lot of shots, but how many of them are on target? Like, what's the quality of the shots that we're actually having? Like, are we getting in the box and creating shooting opportunities, or are we shooting from the edge of the box because we can't find a way through? Are we shooting from ridiculous angles because we can't find a way through? So with Merino, I said from the beginning, I don't think he's a guaranteed starter. I went into the season believing Partey at the base, Rice and Odegaard was our best midfield. And now on the 20th of January, more than halfway through the season, I still believe that's the case. So if you bring Martin Zubimendi in and you move Declan Rice into the 8 position permanently, Merino ain't giving you any more than him. So you're not taking Declan Rice out of the team to put Merino in. Therefore, he becomes a squad option and nothing really more. Just very, very quickly I was talking about the quality of the chances, right? If I said to you, Aston Villa have got great striking options, you'd agree with me, right? If I said to you they've got better centre forward options than us, you'd agree with me. If I said to you Liverpool have better centre forward options than us, you'd agree with me. If I said Chelsea, would you agree with me with sort of Nicholas Jackson playing there? That no? Okay, right, fine. Only if you look at big chances missed, Villa have missed more big chances than us this season with those striking options. They've missed 47. Chelsea have missed 52 in second place, and Liverpool have missed the most with 55. Arsenal are down in fourth with 44 big chances missed in the Premier League this season. So you can talk about the finishing all you like, but teams with better finishers than us are missing those a higher number of chances. Guess why? Because they're creating more chances. So maybe the focus shouldn't always be on who's on the end of it. Focus on the quality of the chance and how regularly those chances are coming around. I can't tell you, Mike, how many times this season I've covered a game, gone into the radio room, heard from Mikel Arteta. That performance was brilliant. It was immense. We dominated the game. We should have won it by this. We should have won it by that, but we haven't. And that's starting to grind on me a little bit because you're looking at the possession stats, and I also understand that you want to defend your team publicly and you don't necessarily want to air your dirty laundry in public. I get all of that. But at the end of the day, You're talking about possession, but what is it converting to?
Yeah.
What is it converting to?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, we're both Cypriots. We love a barbecue, right? We love a souvla. If you give me a shoulder of lamb and I don't cut it right, then someone who knows how to cut it right is going to produce far more good pieces of souvla than me, who's going to waste a load of it because I'm a very bad butcher. Like, do you see what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean.
you get the ingredient, but
Yeah.
maximize it, make the most of it. You got
Yeah.
the possession, but you're not turning it into chances.
Yeah. But that is the what I was talking about earlier. That's the risk and reward. Like, how do you create more chance? You create more chances by risking and throwing more players forward. But we play in a very controlled way. Arteta would say dominant way, where we want to dominate the ball, but we also want to make sure that when teams counterattack us, we're not left exposed. And that obviously has a huge benefit because we're solid defensively. Yes, we've had some lapses, but you lose in attack because you don't have those options. You don't have the runs into the box. When you counterattack, which is something that Liverpool do really well, the reason why we don't score a lot when we win duels and you know more, I think our stats for in terms of shots after winning the ball back, high turnovers is really low because we don't commit the players forward fast enough, and that's what Liverpool do. That is their game. They win the ball up high, they commit loads of bodies forward, and they get shots off, and that's why they create chances. They also miss chances, but that's what it's all about. And I think it's about redressing that balance. There's just one little thing that I wanted to add, which goes back to your point about consistency, because I think this is an issue. But it's from the earlier Athletic article that I quoted earlier.
Yeah. Go.
During 34 games this season, no right back or left back has managed more than 5 games in a row. 16 changes at number 6 in the last 17 games, which is wild.
Yeah.
No same left centre mid for more than 4 games in a row, and 8 changes at right wing in the last 9 games. Now, that is obviously because of injuries primarily, but it's also because I don't think we've figured out our best midfield. But we're going to be having this Declan Rice 6 or 8 debate in like 10 years, because I feel like, I hope that the one thing, and I'll end on this, I hope that if we get Zubimendi, that is it. Like, no more Declan Rice 6 or 8. Just let him play 8, and then we can all relax.
Yeah, and you're right to point out the inconsistency in the selections, and obviously there are reasons for that. And that's because, you know, injuries, but also maybe fatigue as well. You know, people don't factor that in. They'll say, well, so-and-so was available. Hold on. But if he's played 3 times in the week, then there's probably a chance that he's going to need a breather. And that means you got to change it, shake it up a little bit. And I'll just round off by saying you're absolutely right. What you were saying about, you know, committing bodies forward at times to create more chances. I also don't even think it's just that, though. I think that's definitely part of it. But I also think sometimes it's about the pass that you play. Like, the risk can be taken in the pass that you attempt rather than just how many bodies are forward. So, you know, if there's a pass on that you spot, let's say you're Martin Odegaard, you get the ball in the corner of the box and you can spot someone making a run across to the near post, and you think, I could try and thread this through and I got a 50% chance of it finding the player. But if it does find him, I'm giving him a high quality chance. And that means that we're going to lose the ball and we're going to have to get back, which is not what Arteta wants. We know it's all about control. And it comes into that kind of wanting to be risk averse ahead of everything first. But sometimes it's not just about how many players you got. It's about being okay with losing the ball in your attempt to play that, you know, line breaking, really clever pass. And even if it comes off 50% of the time, even less, you're going to create a high quality opportunity. And we're just not doing enough of that for me. So it's in the mindset as well, because I've seen those situations where I've thought, slip it in. And then it'll be, no, actually, I probably shouldn't give the ball away. Let me put my foot on it and I'll just roll it back to the centre midfielder. And then we'll go again. And it's too much of that for me. I've said this before. I can't remember if I was on a pod with you or with someone else, but I definitely said this before. Alexis Sanchez would not play for Mikel Arteta. Just wouldn't, because he'd give the ball away too much, trying to find that way through, trying to play the blockbuster pass, having a shot from a ridiculous place. And Arteta would not want that because he wants control. But those players can sometimes be the difference makers. And when your system is failing, you need those individual bits of brilliance and magic to get you through. Right. We'll leave it there because we've been going for well over an hour. Just before we sign off, I do want to remind you guys that the Chronicles of Aguna YouTube videos at the moment are being brought to you by the good people over at Stocks FC. Check them out. You can buy stocks in your favorite players and watch them pay you weekly dividends as those players perform. Obviously, if they don't perform, your stock can decrease in its value. I'm having a bit of fun with this at the moment. I've got some of my loan stocks there. You can claim 5 free loan stocks that you can play with by scanning the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen or via the link in our description. Check it out. What I will say is this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. So if you can't afford to play, don't play. I'm not trying to get people to commit to something that they can't, right? If you want to have a bit of fun, if you think this is something that you'd be interested in, then take advantage of the offer that's available exclusively to Chronicles of Aguna viewers. Check it out. Stocks FC, my portfolio. Struggling a little bit at the minute, but I am sticking with my guys in the hope that they will bounce back. I've got Kai Havertz there, Gabriel Martinelli, whose stocks have decreased recently, but I fancy to get back on the right track. I've got Ben White. I bought Ben White stocks at really cheap because I believe that when he comes back into the team, you're going to see that rise. I've got Brian and Mbuemo there as well, whose stock rose, and I made a little bit of profit on him this week as well. Check it out, Stocks FC. Claim your free stocks via the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen or via the link in the description. And we thank them for their support of the Chronicles of Aguna podcast. Michael, thank you very, very much as always for joining me. Any last words of wisdom before we sign out?
No, only that. Look, it's been a tough season, but we are fans of the same club. Let's try and remember that. Let's not try and argue with each other. Let's support the team, and yeah, try and have a good ending to the season. Win the Champions League, come back, win the Premier League, and it will be good. Let's hope.
Exactly. Big trophies equal big smiles. And that's all we need in our lives. I'm pretty content with just Arsenal doing well. I don't need much else, to be honest with you. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Mike, let people know how they can follow you, where they can follow you, and what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, so on Blue Sky, just search Mike Stavrou, and then follow all the stuff that I produce over the Athletic, the FC podcast and the Tactics podcast.
Brilliant stuff. We'll be back very, very soon with another episode of the Chronicles of Aguna podcast. I'm going to get this in from now because I know a lot of you are going to start telling me off as the week goes on. But I am going to Cyprus on Friday. So there won't be a live episode on Friday. Whatever we release will be pre-recorded. That'll probably be a preview of the Wolverhampton Wanderers game coming up at the weekend. But I won't actually be reviewing that game until the Monday because I fly back on Sunday night. I've got a wedding that I'm going to hop over to, and then I'm going to be back. So Monday morning, we will bring you reaction to that Wolverhampton Wanderers game. So you're going to have to wait an extra 24 hours or so. Thank you for tuning in as always, and we'll see you on the next episode. Until then, take care.